Welcome to another Apollo Papyrus podcast episode. I am Aaron Apollo Camp. For this episode, my interview guest is an author, blogger, and literary magazine founder and editor. They is the author of the romance novel The Bubble We're In, writes the blog Alex Has Opinions, and is the founder and editor of the literary magazine After the Storm. Their name is Alex Mell-Taylor, and my interview with Alex will follow the note-taking sounds. Alex Mell-Taylor, welcome to the Apollo Papyrus podcast.
Hey, well, glad to be here.
Feel free to introduce yourself to our listeners.
Hi, everybody. My name is Alex Mell-Taylor. I'm a pop culture and politics blogger. My main platform is Medium at alexhasopinions.com, and I'm also a romance writer. So if either of those are your speed, you can find me very Googleable.
I'll start with your romance novel, which is titled The Bubble We're In. Without spoiling too much about The Bubble We're In, what is it about?
So The Bubble We're In is a gay romance novel taking place during COVID. So it is about two men that were dating shortly before the pandemic hit. And then they decide to quarantine together, and it's about the ups and downs of their relationship as sort of the stress of quarantine unfolds.
Were any of the characters of The Bubble We're In based on real life people you either know personally or know about?
Absolutely. So the whole novel was based off this account on Instagram called Gaze Over COVID. Not the whole novel, but it was an inspiration, and it was called Gaze Over COVID, and it was documenting sort of parties that were happening during the height of the initial wave of the COVID-19 pandemic that weren't adhering to any precautions. And so a lot of the scenes were based off real experiences and real events that happened during that first wave.
Yeah, I remember those hearing about those COVID parties in the news during the lockdowns. I didn't participate in any of them myself because I have an immunocompromised mother that I live with, and keep in mind that's something that there's always been a segment of this country's population seemingly has no regard for human life. During hurricanes, you often have people throw hurricane parties ignoring evacuation orders, for example.
Oh my God, that's awful.
Yeah, it is. I'm going to move on. What motivated you to write a romance novel?
I really wanted to write a book about this topic because I was in some ways incensed about it. Also have friends and loved ones that are immunocompromised, and it just frustrated me that this was happening. But at the same time, I started doing a lot of research about it, and I really got in the head of why people could behave that way, right? Like, I started reading interviews about people that were living by themselves and were just sort of isolated for such a long period of time that they sort of lost their bearings to reality almost. And that really got me to understand why someone would make such like a selfish decision, and went like, okay, well, I need to have more empathy than just, because the first draft of the book was a lot more cruel, I would say. I was a lot less forgiving to these characters, and I turned it sort of into a romance to be a little bit more empathetic, even though the text still remains quite critical of their actions.
Is your romance novel independently, traditionally, or hybrid published?
So it's independently published right now. You can find it, though, wherever books are sold: Ingram, bookshop.org, Barnes& & Noble, Amazon. So it's on every platform.
Do you plan on, or are you considering writing more books? And if so, what are some ideas you have for books you will or may write?
So I definitely want to write a sequel to The Bubble We're In at some point. That's not anywhere close to being done, unfortunately. I'm I'm currently have finished the draft of a murder mystery novel that takes place in the future. And I'm very excited about that. That's currently going through developmental edits, but I expect to have it released within the next 4 months or so. I really like the world that has been built. It's sort of in a post apocalyptic future where people have sort of started tackling with the problem of climate change, and it's affected how we live as a society, and it's changed like us on a fundamental level. And it was really fun to both build out that world but also like have a murder mystery. It's going to be called Policing Utopia. So people should be expecting that hopefully by the end of this year.
You, as you mentioned in your introduction, you are the author of the Alex Has Opinions blog, which is a Medium publication. What types of articles do you write for Alex Has Opinions?
Great question. So, Alex Has Opinions is a politics and culture blog. So, it will focus a lot on pieces of media or cultural trends that are sort of happening in the discourse and talking about them in depth, giving my thoughts on them, usually going a little bit into the history, going a little bit into the argumentation. So, it could be anything from talking about the theme of fascism in the Wicked Part 1 movie that came out last year, to talking about uh, sort of anti trans arguments that you see a lot in popular culture and media. And so it ranges from a sort of general discussion to a more specific conversation about a like piece of media or a an event that happened essentially.
An article you wrote recently for Alex Has Opinions. Uh, One of them was where you wrote about how you regard fascism as being a bipartisan political tradition in the United States. What do you mean by that?
Ooh, well, thank you so much. I had a lot of fun is not the right word to say about an article about fascism, but the research for that article was really interesting. What I mean by that is that there's been this ongoing conversation among mainly Black writers talking about how what we often have thought of as fascism isn't a new occurrence. It's something that's sort of been a part of the American project for a long time. So for decades, sort of Black scholars have been saying, like, listen, you may see fascism as this new political project that happened uh, before and after World War II. But if you look at like the elements of fascism that you're talking about, the indoctrinating people to be heroes, the enemy being both strong and weak, the myth making, the trying to return the state to a previous time that never existed and is hyper idealistic. That was the plantation system in America. That has been the system of apartheid that was in America for a very long time. And so those systems had support from all political parties, and the systems that grew out of them, like the carceral state, so the prison system, has pretty deep roots to the plantation system. It's obviously all police forces and all prisons have different traditions because we're talking about a vast geographic scope, but there is this common through line of slave catchers morphing in the South into modern day police departments. So and the support of those institutions is again bipartisan. So it's just sort of like questioning people's complicity and being like, hey, this thing that you see as solely a unitary project by the Republican Party, it's like, yes, they are the biggest offenders. Yes, they are doing the awful stuff that is happening right now. But a lot of the things the tools that are being used right now, specifically by the Trump administration, the ability to use the migration system to suspend rights, the terribleness of the prison system to incarcerate people, those have been bipartisan efforts. So that's what I mean by that. I realize that's a very spicy take, and I, of course, welcome disagreement.
My next question is: do pop culture and politics intersect in America? And if so, in what ways do those things intersect?
Oh, absolutely. I think there is not a way to separate culture from politics. They've always been heavily intertwined. Like some of our deepest political conversations have been about sports, right? The ability for certain minority groups to participate in sports, whether we're talking about the segregation of like black teams that happened decades ago, or we're talking about trans people today, how people are represented in media and what the messages are being said has always been a terrain of struggle in politics. I think that if we're being honest with ourselves, like if we look at the modern far right and how they grew, a lot of it was by using media, right? Like if you go back a decade, there was this thing called Gamergate, right? And it was this inciting incident where a bunch of conservative culture critics emerged criticizing like things like feminism in video games and stuff like that, and those became major like issues in our society to the point that you have like presidents and senators talking about like wokeness in media. So I think we need to be very conscious of how they have always intersected and we can't separate them. There's this great writer that I know, not personally, but that I follow called Margaret Killjoy, and they talk about the culture war. And they, because the common debate is that the culture war is a distraction, and they go, it's like, yes, the culture war is a distraction, but it can still hurt you, right? Like a jab in a boxing match is a distraction, right? Like it's trying to get your attention so that someone can do an uppercross. But that doesn't mean that you can't still get hurt by the jab. We have to be very careful about how culture and media is appropriated by various political factions to achieve political aims.
What motivated you to become a blogger?
I've always loved writing, but truthfully, I've always wanted to be a fiction writer. And blogging was just something I sort of fell into. It was always something that I had more success in, particularly with media. Like, I love media, I love political commentary. Uh, Idealistic society, I think I would probably just be writing fiction novels. But it is where a lot of people's attention appears to be. So I think I am motivated a little bit by that, to be honest. I have been blogging for just my entire adult life. I used to run a pretty successful travel blog, and then I ran uh, a YouTube channel that was focused on politics, and then I sort of went back to writing starting in 2018.
You are also the founder and editor of the After the Storm literary magazine. What types of stories does After the Storm publish?
Fantastic question. So after the storm, and it's not just my project, I want to clarify, there's like a lot of people working on it with me. It's a speculative fiction magazine, and the point of it is to sort of imagine better futures. It's called After the Storm because the storm, the metaphor for it is it's the current moment. It's all the stuff that we can't move past in our society, whether that be fascism, whether that be our current economic system, whether that be patriarchy, and how sometimes it's so difficult for people to imagine alternatives to any of these structures because they're just seen as so intrinsic. They're like water or gravity to a lot of people. So the point of After the Storm is writers are literally imagining alternatives. They're imagining how they're using fiction, speculative fiction, as a vehicle to imagine how society could be, right? It's like, well, we're so used to things going this way, but what if we lived in a world where things were different? And that's sort of the conversation that it's pushing for. It's all different writers. We're focused. Most of the editors are focused out of the greater DC, Washington D.C. area, but we accept writers all over the world.
What motivated you to found your own literary magazine?
You know, honestly, I just did it. I wasn't expecting it to be a big deal at all, to be honest. I felt like there was just this dearth of media when it came to imagining better futures and imagining alternative futures. Like there are obviously writers that do that. Ursula K. Le Guin's The Dispossessed is a great one. Uh, Octavia Butler is a great writer, does that. Like plenty of people do these imaginings, but it's a small amount of people. And I sort of just created it on a whim. And then I got involved in activism and in my local area, and I began talking to people, and I mentioned the publication, and they thought it was a really good idea. And so a bunch of people just came on through that method. Like a lot of people were just like, "Oh yeah, we'll help you do this." And so it's sort of grown organically. It's like, yes, I founded it, but it would have been nothing if it wasn't for the community support that sort of grew organically. I was just the person that threw an idea out there. And it's been really great to see people react to it.
You are transgender, non-binary. Now, I would never ask you to dead name yourself, as that would be extremely inappropriate. But what was your gender transition like, and have you personally faced any anti-transgender bigotry?
That's a fantastic question. And I so thank you for your sensitivities. I get asked questions all the time by people. So I'm sort of like I recognize as someone online that I'm going to be asked about my identity all the time. I don't really take offense to it, but I appreciate your sensitivity there. I I think that my transition was better than people that in previous decades. Like I think that for a long time, and it's sort of reversing now, it's been easier to be trans in America, depending on where you live, because there's been more access to resources. Like, I did not need a psychologist to validate my transgender identity so that I could begin transition as an adult. I started transitioning as an adult, and for a long time, you needed a psychologist to validate your identity. And if they didn't think you met the criteria, you wouldn't be able to transition. And that led to this whole black market situation where people got their hormones illegally. That was starting to go away because there were all these legitimate methods where that you could get your hormones legally and you would be able to transition and have ongoing doctor support, which is very important because I currently receive regular blood work, for example, for my hormones. So I know exactly how it's impacting my body, as anyone that is doing it the sort of like state sanctioned way does, because their doctors will prescribe that they get regular blood work and will be monitoring how the hormones affect their bodies. So in many ways, transitioning when I did was like a gift because it was much, much, much harder even 5 years ago. Like 5 years before I was transitioning, depending on what state or country I would have been in, I would have needed to jump through all these other hoops. So I feel blessed in many ways, and it saddens me that that's regressing as a society, that there's going to be people that maybe don't have the resources that I had, and that saddens me a lot. I like as if I've experienced transphobia, of course, that just happens. People are mean sometimes. People laugh. People gawk. People will whisper about you. That just happens. Depending on how much effort I put in, I can actually pass pretty well in a binary trans sense. So I don't have to worry about that often now at my stage of my transition. But when I was transitioning early on, it was very difficult. Now I deal with misogyny more than I deal with anti-transness. I deal with the most anti-transness online because I'm self-identified as a trans person, and so people will send harassment and stuff like that. But in my personal life, I'm fine, if that makes sense.
One final question. If you could live in any fictional world, what would it be?
Ooh, that's a really good question. I think that my generic answer is I would live on Earth in the Federation for Star Trek because it's this post-scarcity future that has all these rights enshrined in the Federation, and I think existence there would be pretty sweet. Like, from a practical level, I think I would love to be in Starfleet. I would love to be expanding human knowledge and doing all of these very interesting things uh, in the Federation. There's this other book that I just read, and it's called Everything for Everyone. It is a fictional, uh, not anthology. It's like a fictional interview series where it's taking place in the future, where in the wake of this better world where everyone is taken care of, regardless of their economic circumstances or disability status or gender or anything like that. And that world is so beautiful. So I think just because I've just read this book, I think I normally would say the Federation, but I think I would say Earth in the novel Everything for Everyone.
Alex, you were an amazing guest, and I thank you for appearing on the Apollo Papyrus podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. This was a joy, and you asked fantastic questions.
Although I edited this out of the interview, a severe thunderstorm warning was issued part of my home county right after I asked Alex about their literary magazine after the storm. That was an interesting coincidence, to say the least. Signing off for this episode, this is Aaron Apollo Camp reminding y'all to find your writing and reading purpose. Bye for now. Copyright 2025, Aaron Apollo Camp, all rights reserved. This podcast episode is intended for the private listening of our audience. Any reuse or retransmission of this podcast episode without the express written consent of the podcast host is prohibited except under fair use guidelines. Royalty-free music and sound effects obtained from https://www.zapsplat.com.